Betrayed by her own flesh and blood, a young woman was auctioned off to the highest bidder simply because her shallow parents deemed her too heavy to love. But the ruthless syndicate boss who bought her didn't want a trophy. He wanted a mother for his 4 broken children. Sweat beaded on Charles Hayes's forehead, ruining the crisp collar of his custom Brooks Brothers shirt. Beside him in the plush leather back seat of the town car, his wife Meredith nervously twisted her diamond wedding band, her eyes darting everywhere, except toward the young woman sitting opposite them. Cameron kept her gaze locked on the passing streetlights of Chicago's industrial district. At 24, she was used to being the invisible elephant in the room, often literally, according to her mother's cruel jibes. Cameron was fat. She had always been plus-sized, possessing a soft, curving figure that her image-obsessed, country club-dwelling parents treated like a terminal disease. For years, she had endured their backhanded compliments, the forced diets, and the whispers at family gatherings. But tonight, the atmosphere in the car felt far more sinister than a trip to another humiliating weight loss clinic. Charles had made a terrible mistake. A series of bad investments and a gambling addiction had drained the Hayes family fortune, leaving them severely in debt to Lorenzo Moretti, a vicious underboss in the city's underground syndicate. When Lorenzo called in the $500,000 debt, Charles had nothing left to offer. Nothing except his daughter. "Pull yourself together, Cameron." Meredith snapped her voice, trembling slightly as the car pulled up to an abandoned shipping warehouse. "And stop slouching. You look like a sack of potatoes in that dress." "Why are we here, Mother?" Cameron asked, her voice soft but laced with dread. Charles refused to meet her eyes as the driver opened the door. "It is a business arrangement, Penny. We just need you to be cooperative. If you do this for us, our financial troubles are over." Before Cameron could demand a real answer, 2 men in sharp, dark suits flanked the car, hauling her out by her arms. Panic surged through her chest. She struggled her soft frame, no match for the hardened muscle of the mob enforcers. They dragged her through the rusting metal doors of the warehouse, her parents trailing behind like cowardly shadows. Inside, the space had been transformed into a lavish, smoke-filled den of iniquity. High-stakes tables were scattered across the concrete floor, surrounded by dangerous men, drinking imported whiskey and trading illicit favors. At the far end of the room stood a raised platform. Lorenzo Moretti stood waiting, a nasty smirk playing on his scarred face. Charles Meredith. And this? Lorenzo's eyes raked over Cameron, his lip curling in obvious disgust. "This is the collateral. She's young Lorenzo." Charles stammered, wringing his hands. "She's a hard worker. You can use her in one of your establishments. She can clean, she can cook. Just wipe the ledger clean, I beg of you." Lorenzo laughed, a sharp, barking sound that made the surrounding men turn and sneer. "I run high-end clubs, Charles. My girls are 10s. I don't put a double wide on the main stage. What am I supposed to do with this?" Tears of pure humiliation pricked Cameron's eyes. She stood trembling on the platform, the harsh spotlight illuminating every curve she had spent her life trying to hide. Her parents had actually done it. They had brought her to a human auction to pay off a mob debt, and now even the criminals were rejecting her for her size. "Start the bidding at $1, one of the enforcers yelled from the crowd, sparking a chorus of cruel laughter. "Maybe 50 cents per pound." "Please," Cameron whispered, looking down at her mother. Meredith simply turned her head away, taking a sip from a champagne flute handed to her by a waiter. The ultimate betrayal. They were throwing her to the wolves to save their own perfectly manicured skins. "I'll give you $1,000 for her to scrub my floors," a greasy-haired lieutenant called out, chuckling. $2,000, another mocked. "I need a new bouncer." Cameron squeezed her eyes shut, wishing the concrete floor would open up and swallow her whole. The jeers and insults rained down on her, shattering whatever fragile self-esteem she had managed to build over the years. She braced herself for a life of indentured servitude, abused and forgotten. Then the heavy steel doors at the back of the warehouse slammed open, the sound echoing like a gunshot over the raucous crowd. The laughter died instantly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Striding through the entryway was Dominic Romano. He was a terrifyingly handsome man, tall and broad-shouldered, radiating an aura of absolute authority. As the head of the city's most powerful crime syndicate, Dominic answered to no one. He wore a midnight blue three-piece suit that fit his athletic frame flawlessly, his dark hair neatly swept back, and his jaw set in a rigid line of permanent annoyance. Rumors said he hadn't smiled since his wife was killed in a car bomb 3 years ago. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. Lorenzo's smug expression vanished, replaced by pale, sweating terror. "Boss, we didn't expect you tonight." Dominic ignored Lorenzo. His piercing grey eyes were locked entirely on the platform. He looked at the weeping girl in the center of the cruel spectacle, then shifted his gaze to Charles and Meredith, who were practically trembling out of their expensive shoes. "What is this, Lorenzo?" Dominic's voice was a low rumble, devoid of emotion, but heavy with threat. "Debt collection, Mr. Romano," Lorenzo stammered. "Hayes here owed me $500K. Tried to pawn off his double-wide daughter to settle the books. We were just having a little fun with it." Dominic's eyes flicked back to Cameron. She met his gaze, her chest heaving, tears staining her cheeks, but she stubbornly refused to look away. Beneath the humiliation and the fear, Dominic saw a flicker of raw, unyielding survival in her eyes. He recognized that look. It was the same look he saw in the mirror every morning. 500,000, Dominic said quietly. The room went dead silent. "Sir," Lorenzo asked, confused. "The debt is 500,000. I am bidding $1 million. Dominic reached into his jacket, pulling out a sleek black checkbook. He hastily scribbled the amount, tore the check free, and slapped it onto a nearby poker table. "The debt is cleared. The girl comes with me." Charles gasped, his face lighting up with greedy salvation. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Romano. Thank you. She's all yours. Do whatever you want." Dominic shot Charles a glare, so lethal it snapped the man's mouth shut instantly. "If I ever see either of you in my city again, I will have you buried under the new stadium. Do you understand me?" Charles and Meredith nodded frantically, backing away, before turning and sprinting toward the exit, leaving their daughter behind without a single backward glance. Dominic walked slowly to the edge of the platform and extended a large, scarred hand toward Cameron. "Come with me," he commanded softly. Cameron looked at his hand, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had just been traded from a cruel underboss to the most dangerous man in the state. Trembling, she placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and surprisingly gentle as he helped her down the steps. The ride to the Romano estate was suffocatingly quiet. Cameron sat stiffly in the back of Dominic's armored SUV, her hands clutched tightly in her lap. The city lights eventually gave way to winding, tree-lined roads, signaling their entry into an elite, heavily guarded suburban enclave. "Why?" Cameron finally croaked, her voice hoarse from crying. "Why did you buy me if you think I'm going to be some sort of companion?" Dominic let out a harsh, bitter exhale, pouring himself a measure of bourbon from the car's crystal decanter. "I have no interest in mistresses, Miss Hayes, nor do I care about your parents' pathetic squabbles. I bought you because I have a problem that requires a unique solution." Cameron frowned confusion, replacing her fear. "What problem?" Dominic swirled the amber liquid in his glass. I have 4 children. Since my wife passed, they have become unmanageable. They are grieving, angry, and wild. They have driven away 6 professional nannies in the last 3 months. The last one left in an ambulance because my twin boys set a booby trap on the grand staircase. Cameron's eyes widened. You bought a human being at a mafia auction. To babysit, to parent, Dominic corrected sharply. To be a mother to them. I saw how you stood on that stage. Your parents humiliated you. Those animals mocked your body, and yet you held your head up. You didn't shatter. You've endured psychological warfare your entire life, which means you have the thick skin required to survive my children. Cameron stared at the formidable mafia boss. He wasn't looking at her size. He wasn't evaluating her worth based on the scale. He was looking at her resilience. For the first time in her life, someone saw her pain as a qualification, a strength rather than a defect. The SUV passed through massive wrought-iron gates, pulling up to a sprawling stone mansion that looked more like a fortress. Dominic led her inside. The foyer was magnificent, with sweeping double staircases and a massive crystal chandelier, but the atmosphere was undeniably cold and chaotic. "Wait here," Dominic said, shrugging off his suit jacket. "I will gather them." Cameron stood awkwardly in the grand foyer, wrapping her arms around her soft waist. Suddenly, a sharp, stinging sensation hit her shoulder. She gasped, looking down to see a small red plastic suction cup dart on the marble floor. She looked up. Peering over the second-floor balcony were 2 identical 8-year-old boys with dark, messy hair and mischievous grins. Oliver and Mason. One of them held a brightly colored toy crossbow. "Direct hit," Oliver whispered loudly. "She's a big target, Ollie, you couldn't miss," Mason snickered. Cameron sighed. She picked up the dart, her nerves suddenly settling. They were just kids. Badly behaved, grieving kids. "You know," Cameron called up to them, her voice calm and surprisingly steady, "if you account for the trajectory and the air resistance, you should aim slightly higher next time to get better velocity." The twins blinked in unison, utterly thrown off by a target offering tactical advice instead of screaming for their father. Before they could respond, a teenager stomped down the stairs deliberately, shouldering past Cameron hard enough to make her stumble. It was Vincent, the 15-year-old eldest son. His eyes were dark and full of a familiar, jagged anger. "Don't talk to my brothers," Vincent spat, glaring at her. "You're just another gold digger Dad brought home. How much is he paying you to pretend you care? You won't last a week." Cameron straightened her dress, looking Vincent dead in the eye. "He didn't pay me a salary, Vincent. He paid off my father's gambling debt. I literally have nowhere else to go. So unfortunately for you, you are stuck with me." Vincent's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to adults firing back with blunt honesty. Usually the nannies cowered or tried to offer him fake saccharine sympathy. Just then, Dominic walked into the foyer, holding the hand of a tiny, fragile-looking 5-year-old girl. Lily. She had enormous brown eyes and clutched a worn-out stuffed rabbit tightly against her chest. She hadn't spoken a single word since the day her mother's car exploded. "I see you've met," Dominic said, his voice instantly demanding respect. The boys on the balcony scrambled down the stairs, standing in a semicircle with their older brother. "This is Cameron. She is staying with us indefinitely. You will treat her with the respect you would show me. Is that understood?" "Whatever," Vincent muttered, crossing his arms. Oliver. Mason. Kitchen. "Now," Dominic commanded. "It's past dinner." The massive kitchen was a chef's dream, equipped with industrial stainless steel appliances and marble countertops. However, it was currently a disaster zone. The previous chef had quit that morning, and takeout boxes littered the island. "I can cook," Cameron offered, quietly, noticing the hungry looks on the twins' faces. She loved cooking. In her miserable household, baking and cooking had been her only escape, her sanctuary. Dominic looked at her, then nodded. "Show me." Cameron washed her hands and raided the massive walk-in pantry. She found fresh pasta, San Marzano tomatoes, garlic basil, and heavy cream. She moved around the kitchen with surprising grace for her size, a quiet confidence taking over. She didn't try to force conversation. She just worked. As she was chopping vegetables, she felt a tug on her skirt. She looked down to see little Lily staring up at her with wide eyes, pointing at a high shelf where a jar of homemade chocolate chip cookies sat out of reach. Cameron smiled softly. She crouched down to eye level with the silent little girl. "You like cookies?" "Me too. My mum used to tell me I wasn't allowed to eat them." Cameron conspiratorially leaned in. "But I learned a secret. Cookies taste way better when you eat them before dinner." She stood, retrieved a cookie and handed it to Lily. The little girl took it tentatively, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips before she scurried away to eat it under the kitchen table. From the doorway, Dominic watched the exchange. His chest tightened. He hadn't seen Lily smile even slightly in 3 years. He watched Cameron expertly toss the pasta in a rich, creamy red sauce, her soft hips swaying slightly, as she moved completely unaware of his intense gaze. She wasn't like the plastic perfect women in his world. She was real. She was warm. But across town, the situation was far from warm. Lorenzo Moretti sat in his dimly lit office, slamming his fist onto his desk. Dominic Romano had humiliated him in front of his men, the great syndicate boss paying $1 million for a fat, discarded girl. It didn't make sense. Unless Romano had a weakness, a new vulnerability that Lorenzo could exploit. Lorenzo picked up his encrypted cell phone and dialed a number. "Find out everything you can about Charles Hayes' daughter. Romano took her into his house. I want to know why, and I want to know how we can use her to break him." Over the next 2 grueling but profoundly beautiful months, the sprawling Romano estate slowly and miraculously transformed from a cold, echoing marble fortress into a vibrant living home. Cameron did not attempt to forcefully push her way into the broken children's lives. Nor did she arrogantly demand their respect or instant affection, which was the exact disastrous strategy the previous nannies had attempted. Instead, she simply existed as a constant, comforting, and entirely unwavering presence in their deeply chaotic, unpredictable world. Cameron's mornings consistently started well before dawn. The rich, inviting aroma of freshly roasted espresso, sizzling thick-cut bacon, and warm cinnamon pastries would drift through the cavernous, previously empty hallways, naturally drawing the children out of their respective bedrooms with sleepy, genuine smiles. Cameron intimately knew what it felt like to wake up in a house filled with bitter resentment and icy judgment. She had sworn a silent, unbreakable oath to herself that these 4 grieving children would only ever wake up to warmth and absolute acceptance. She cooked hearty, rich, aromatic meals that inevitably drew the highly fractured family to the massive mahogany dining table every single evening. She eagerly helped Oliver and Mason build intricate, sprawling, multi-room pillow forts in the vast, dusty library, laughing loudly and without any restraint when they successfully ambushed her with a relentless barrage of foam darts. She never yelled. She never complained about her deeply unconventional situation. When Vincent came home one rainy Tuesday afternoon, permanently suspended for starting a vicious, bloody fistfight at his elite private high school, Cameron did not lecture him or instantly threatened to call his terrifying father. She simply walked out to the detached, dimly lit garage where the teenager was furiously punishing a heavy leather punching bag, his knuckles bleeding, cracked, and completely raw. Cameron did not try to stop him, or naively tell him that violence was never the answer. She knew firsthand that sometimes immense physical pain was the only language a fundamentally broken heart could effectively speak. She sat completely silent on an overturned plastic bucket, calmly watching him burn off his dangerous adrenaline before quietly handing him a bottle of iced water and a cold chemical pack. He called little Lily a freak just because she doesn't talk, Vincent had aggressively muttered, staring intently at the cracked concrete floor, his shoulders heaving, fully expecting a harsh reprimand. Then he absolutely unequivocally deserved the black eye you gave him, Cameron replied simply, without missing a single beat. Vincent's head snapped up in pure, unadulterated shock, and for the very first time since she had arrived at the mansion, he offered her a genuine, unguarded, boyish smile. He realized right then and there that she wasn't a corporate spy for his intimidating father. She was fiercely, loyally on their side. Dominic watched all of this incredible progress unfold from the periphery of his dark world with a profound sense of quiet reverence and utter disbelief. His dead, heavily hardened heart was forcefully beating again, violently awoken by this soft, miraculously resilient woman who had inadvertently invaded his private sanctuary. Cameron's weight, the very physical attribute her cruel, superficial parents had callously discarded her for, was something Dominic found himself increasingly helplessly mesmerized by. He genuinely loved the soft, sweeping curve of her wide hips when she stood gracefully at the industrial stove, and the comforting plushness of her thighs when tiny Lily climbed securely into her lap to fall peacefully asleep. To Dominic, Cameron wasn't just physically beautiful. She was a radiant, untouchable goddess of warmth, light, and life in a bleak world completely dominated by violence, brutal betrayal, and sudden death. One intensely stormy Thursday evening, long after the 4 exhausted children had been safely tucked into their warm beds, Dominic found Cameron standing in the dimly lit, cavernous kitchen, quietly wiping down the expansive marble countertops. The massive house was utterly silent, save for the rhythmic, heavy drumming of rain relentlessly assaulting the tall glass windows. "You look absolutely exhausted," Dominic murmured softly, his deep, gravelly voice slicing through the thick quiet as he stepped gracefully into the warm yellow light. He had already discarded his tailored suit jacket and unbuttoned his crisp white collar, looking far less like a terrifying mafia syndicate boss, and significantly more like a deeply weary, lonely man desperately seeking emotional refuge. Cameron jumped slightly in surprise, dropping the damp dish towel on the floor, her soft cheeks instantly flushing a deep, embarrassed crimson. "I'm just cleaning up the mess, Dominic. It is really nothing at all." He stepped much, deliberately and purposefully, closing the physical distance between them until he could actually smell the faint, intoxicating scent of vanilla extract and flour clinging to her warm skin. His exceptionally large, heavily calloused hand reached out slowly, gently but firmly, capturing her soft chin, tilting her face upward to directly meet his intense, storm-gray eyes. "You constantly take care of every single person in this entire house, Cameron. Tell me who exactly takes care of you." "I am completely used to taking care of myself," she whispered breathlessly, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs like a trapped bird. She instinctively tried to step backward, her deep-seated lifelong insecurities instantly flaring up to emotionally protect her. "You do not have to politely pretend with me, Dominic. I know exactly why I am truly here. I am just the hired nanny. I know I am definitely not I am not the kind of conventionally attractive woman a powerful man like you actually wants." Dominic's grey eyes darkened dangerously, swirling with sudden, barely contained, possessive fury. He stepped directly into her personal space, completely crowding her against the cool, hard edge of the marble counter, deliberately leaving her absolutely no room for retreat. "Do not ever let the toxic poison of your pathetic, worthless parents speak for you again. Do you have any earthly idea how excruciatingly, painfully hard it is for me to keep my hands off of you every single day?" Before her spinning mind could accurately process his shocking, blunt confession, Dominic leaned down aggressively and captured her trembling lips. The breathtaking kiss was not gentle. It was fiercely hungry, deeply desperate, and entirely possessive. Cameron gasped sharply into his warm mouth, her soft hands instinctively coming up to tightly grip his broad, muscular shoulders to physically steady herself. He forcefully pulled her flush against his hard, heavily muscled body, tangling one large hand deep in her silky hair, while his other hand settled heavily on the generous curve of her hip, letting her feel exactly how much he truly desired her. His hands roamed over her soft, lush curves, with absolute religious reverence, worshipping the exact body she had spent her entire miserable life hiding under baggy, oversized clothes and immense shame. For the first time in her 24 years of lonely existence, Cameron did not feel fat, clumsy, or ugly. She felt wholly unconditionally adored. She felt incredibly intoxicatingly powerful. But miles outside the heavily fortified stone walls of the Romano estate, a highly sinister, violent darkness was rapidly gathering momentum. Lorenzo Moretti had frantically spent the last 2 months heavily bribing corrupt security guards and gathering illicit, highly classified intelligence through a notoriously dirty private investigator named Harrison Bennett. Lorenzo knew absolutely everything about Cameron. He knew Dominic was completely, blindly obsessed with her. And most importantly, he knew that tomorrow afternoon, Cameron was taking all 4 children to a highly exclusive private botanical garden situated in the city center for an educational field trip, escorted by only 2 of Romano's armed security guards. "We hit them hard right at the garden," Lorenzo confidently told his heavily armed, ruthless crew of mercenaries, his terribly scarred face twisted into a sadistic, highly anticipating grin. "Take the fat girl and the crying kids alive. Romano will immediately surrender his entire criminal empire, every single shipping port, every underground club, just to get them back. And if he stupidly refuses, we will gladly send them back to him in tiny pieces. The ultimate price of loyalty." The private botanical garden was a lush conservatory in the bustling city center. Cameron held little Lily by the hand, pointing out bright pink lotus flowers. Oliver and Mason ran excitedly ahead, marveling at the indoor waterfalls. Vincent walked closely beside Cameron, his calculating eyes sharply scanning the crowd. He inherited his father's lethal instincts, and internal alarm bells rang violently. "Something is wrong," Vincent murmured, stepping closer to shield Cameron. Before she could ask what he meant, the massive, vaulted glass ceiling above them shattered abruptly into a million sparkling, deadly pieces. Terrifying chaos erupted instantly as a dozen armed men stormed through the shattered doors. Screams echoed loudly as panicked civilians scrambled for the emergency exits. The 2 Romano guards stationed near the entrance instantly drew their concealed weapons. However, they were ruthlessly gunned down by rapid automatic gunfire before they could fire. "Get down on the ground!" Cameron screamed loudly. She bravely threw her entire body weight over Oliver Mason and Lily, pinning the terrified children securely behind a massive concrete planter. Vincent dove beside them, swiftly pulling a compact pistol from his jacket. He kept this dangerous secret hidden. "Well, well," Lorenzo mocked, His voice echoed chillingly through the foliage. He stepped into clear view, resting an assault rifle against his shoulder. His boots crunched on the broken glass. "Look at the happy family trip. Come out, Piggy. Romano is not here today." Hot tears streamed down Cameron's face, but she resolutely refused to show weakness. She looked urgently at the terrified faces of the children sheltered beneath her. Lily trembled violently. Oliver and Mason desperately clutched Cameron's soft dress. Vincent bravely raised his gun hands, shaking slightly, preparing to defend his younger siblings to the absolute bloody death. "Vincent, no!" Cameron whispered, fiercely grabbing his wrist with astonishing strength. "Put the gun down now. I will never let them take you." Vincent growled back, tears of furious anger pooling in his eyes. Cameron pressed a swift kiss to his forehead. "I am the adult here. I protect you. Do not move a muscle." Taking a deep breath, she slowly stood up to her full height. She raised her hands in the air, stepping out from behind the planter, to draw Lorenzo's dangerous attention away from the hiding children. She stared directly into the eyes of the ruthless killer. "Leave them alone," Cameron said firmly. Her voice shook with defiant steel. "You want Dominic to suffer? Take me instead. I am all he wants. The kids mean nothing to your vendetta. Let them walk safely, and I will go quietly." Lorenzo laughed loudly, leveling his rifle at her chest. "You think you are a hero. You are just a useless bargaining chip. I am taking all of you. You are taking absolutely no one." The terrifying voice boomed like thunder. Dominic Romano emerged looking exactly like the angel of death. He was not alone in the shattered glass room. Dozens of elite enforcers silently poured into the greenhouse, surrounding Lorenzo's men in an inescapable tactical net. Dominic had intercepted Harrison Bennett's corrupt communications and set a trap. Before Lorenzo could fire, Dominic efficiently shot twice from his handgun. The bullets tore violently through Lorenzo's kneecaps. The underboss shrieked in sudden pain, collapsing onto the stone pathway. Seeing their leader fall, the hired men dropped their weapons, surrendering immediately. Dominic sprinted desperately down the stairs toward the planter. His chest heaved with terror until he saw Cameron standing unharmed. He dropped heavily to his knees, right in the damp dirt. He pulled her into a bone-crushing, desperate embrace. "I have got you," he choked out with emotion. The children immediately swarmed them. Vincent hugged Cameron's waist, while Oliver and Mason clung to her arms, sobbing. Then a tiny voice broke through the heavy aftermath. "Mama," little Lily repeated, staring up with tear-filled eyes. Cameron broke down into happy sobs, holding the girl tightly. Exactly 1 full year later, the cruel Hayes parents received an envelope. Inside was a photograph of Cameron in a beautiful silk wedding gown. She was surrounded by 4 children and a handsome, adoring husband. If you loved this dramatic mafia romance and want to hear more thrilling, real-life inspired stories of revenge, true love, and ultimate redemption, please hit that like button. Right now, don't forget to share this video with your friends and subscribe to our channel for daily storytelling content. Your support helps us bring more incredible twisted characters to life. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a plot twist. Drop a comment below on what you want to see.